The day Margot Ellison walked into Hargrove Memorial Hospital with a folder of documents and a face that gave nothing away, nobody paid her the slightest bit of attention. That was the point. She wore the same charcoal wool coat she'd had for 11 years, the one with the fraying cuff on the left sleeve that she'd never bothered to replace. Her hair was pulled back the way it always was when she had somewhere important to be. Not styled, just controlled. She had driven herself, parked in the public garage on the 3rd level, and taken the elevator down like any other person who had somewhere to be that morning. Nobody at the front desk looked up when she pushed through the glass doors. She sat down in one of the blue plastic chairs near the information kiosk, crossed her ankles, and waited. The waiting area of Hargrove Memorial was the kind of room that told you everything about an institution without a single person saying a word. The floors were clean, but the chairs were cracked. The plants in the corner were silk. A television mounted near the ceiling played a morning news program on mute, captions scrolling too fast for anyone to read. A hand sanitizer dispenser on the wall blinked a low battery warning that had probably been blinking for weeks. Margot noticed all of it. She noticed the way the receptionist's eyes slid past a woman in a housekeeping uniform without acknowledgement. She noticed the security guard near the entrance, who straightened up when a man in a suit walked in and relaxed again the moment he passed. She noticed the small boy sitting 2 chairs down from her, maybe 7 years old, holding a stuffed elephant by one ear and watching the door with the particular patience of a child who has learned that adults take a very long time to do everything. She did not take out her phone. She did not open her folder. She just sat there in her old coat and watched the room work. She had built this hospital. Not the building itself that had stood on the corner of Whitmore and 14th since 1961, when Hargrove Memorial was founded by Edmund Hargrove, a cardiologist from Kentucky who believed that a community hospital should serve the community it was named for, not just the patients who could afford the private suites on the 6th floor. The building had been renovated twice before Margot was born and once after. The lobby had been redesigned, the east wing had been added, the imaging center in the basement had been upgraded 3 times. But the money that had kept this place running for the last 8 years, the endowment, the research grants, the new cardiac unit that had opened last spring, the free clinic on the ground floor that served over 400 uninsured patients a month, that money had come from the Ellison Foundation. And the Ellison Foundation was Margot. Nobody at the front desk knew that. Why would they? Her name was on a plaque in the cardiac wing, but it was a small plaque, mounted at a height that most adults walked past without noticing. She had specified the size herself. She had also specified that her name would appear on no press releases, no galas, no annual reports. She had agreed to a plaque only because the hospital's board had pushed for something, and she had decided a plaque was the least disruptive option. Her late husband, Conrad, had found this funny. "You give $40 million to a hospital," he used to say, "and you won't let them put your name on the door." He wasn't criticizing. He was just amused in the way he'd always been amused by her. With warmth, with a little bewilderment, with genuine admiration underneath both. Conrad had died 3 years ago. A stroke at 61 on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday in March. It had been fast, which the doctors told her was merciful, and she had thanked them and driven home and sat in the kitchen for 4 hours before she remembered to call her daughter. After that she had given more. Not out of grief exactly. Or not only that. She had given more because Conrad had believed in what the foundation was doing. And because continuing to believe in it was the only way she knew how to keep that part of him alive. She had also, somewhere in the back of her mind, given more because she knew what it felt like to sit in a waiting room and wonder if the person behind the desk was going to help you or find a reason not to. She had been 23 when she brought her mother to an emergency room in a city she didn't know, and a nurse had looked at her across the counter, just looked at her, just that one look. And she had understood immediately that she was going to have to fight for everything. She had fought. She always had. The reason Margot was sitting in the lobby of Hargrove Memorial on a Tuesday morning in November had nothing to do with a medical emergency. 6 weeks earlier, she had received a call from a man named Dennis Webb, the hospital's new chief operating officer, who had been brought in 8 months ago by the board to modernize operations. She had spoken to him once before, briefly, at an event she'd attended as a courtesy. He'd shaken her hand and called her Mrs. Ellison and moved on quickly to the next person. Dennis had called to inform her with great professional courtesy that the Foundation's free clinic program was being restructured. The restructuring, he explained, would involve reducing clinic hours from 5 days a week to 2, implementing a nominal copay for services, and transitioning the clinic's patient roster to a referral-based system rather than walk-in. These changes, he said, will allow us to better allocate resources and serve patients more effectively. Margot had listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked 3 questions. What would happen to the 400 patients currently using the clinic who could not afford a copay? What data had been used to determine that a referral-based system would serve them more effectively? And had the board reviewed the terms of the Foundation's original gift agreement, which specified that the clinic would operate as a walk-in service for uninsured patients for a minimum of 15 years? Dennis Webb had paused for slightly too long. I'll have my assistant follow up with you on those details, he said. That had been 6 weeks ago. The follow-up had never come. Instead, 2 weeks later, the hospital's communications team had sent a press release announcing the clinic restructuring. 2 weeks after that, Margot had learned through a contact on the nursing staff that Dennis was already in conversation with a private urgent care company about leasing the clinic space. She had read the Foundation's gift agreement again. Then she had read it a 3rd time. Then she had called her attorney, a woman named Gwen she had worked with for 15 years, and asked her to read it too. Then she had driven to the hospital on a Tuesday morning in November, parked on the 3rd level of the public garage, and sat down in one of the blue plastic chairs near the information kiosk. She wanted to see the place before she reminded them who she was. At 9:45, a young woman in scrubs came through a door marked staff only and stopped at the reception desk. She spoke quietly to the receptionist, who glanced toward the lobby. Her eyes landed on Margot for a moment, then moved on. The young woman in scrubs came over anyway. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you here to see someone?" "I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Dr. Raymond Cho," Margot said. "His office confirmed it last week." The woman checked something on her tablet. "I don't see your name. Can I ask what it's in reference to?" "Foundation business? And your name?" "Margot Ellison." Something shifted in the woman's expression. Not recognition, more like the particular alertness of someone who recognizes that a name is significant without being sure why. "Let me check with Dr. Cho's assistant," she said. "One moment." She went back to the desk. Margot watched her speak to the receptionist, who picked up a phone. There was a short conversation. The receptionist put the phone down and said something that made the woman in scrubs glance back toward the lobby. She came back. "Cho's assistant says he's in a budget meeting with Mr. Webb that's running long. She's asking if you can reschedule." Margot looked at her steadily. "I drove 40 minutes this morning for a 9 o'clock appointment that was confirmed 3 days ago. Please let Dr. Cho's assistant know that I'm happy to wait." The woman seemed faintly uncomfortable. "Of course. Can I get you anything while you wait? Coffee, water?" "I'm fine," Margot said. "Thank you." She sat back down. The boy with the stuffed elephant was still there. He had moved one chair closer to her, not quite deliberately, the way children approach things they're curious about. Sideways, with plausible deniability. His elephant, she noticed, was missing an eye. "What's his name?" she asked. The boy looked at her with the serious scrutiny that children reserve for adults who talk to them directly. "Gerald," he said after a moment. "Good name. He's 12, the boy added. "In elephant years, that's still pretty young. Do you know how old elephants live to be?" 70, the boy said immediately. "Some of them 75, in the wild." He considered her. "Are you waiting for someone?" "I'm waiting for a meeting." "Me too," he said. "My grandma's getting tests. She's been in there a long time." Margot looked at him. He was doing the thing children do, where they tell you something frightening in the most matter-of-fact way possible, because they haven't yet learned that adults expect fear to look a certain way. "Tests take a while," she said, "but the people in there know what they're doing." He nodded slowly, accepting this. "She said I could come next time and see where she works. She's a nurse. Used to be, I mean. She retired. That's a good reason to come back." He seemed satisfied with that and turned his attention back to Gerald, adjusting the elephant's one remaining eye with the focused care of a surgeon. Margot watched him for a moment, then looked back toward the reception desk. She had been sitting here for 45 minutes. At 10:35, Raymond Cho finally came through the door. Raymond was 52, lean, with the kind of posture that came from decades of standing in operating rooms. He was the hospital's chief of cardiology and, more relevantly, the chair of the Foundation's Hospital Liaison Committee. The formal body that was supposed to ensure the hospital was meeting its obligations under the gift agreement. He had also been one of Conrad's friends. Not a close friend, but the kind you had in professional life. Someone who showed up at the right events, remembered your kids' names, sent a handwritten note when Conrad died. He saw her from across the lobby and the expression on his face was, she thought, instructive. Not pleased. Not guilty, exactly. Something more like braced. He walked over and shook her hand. "Margot, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, Raymond." She did not say it was fine. Come on back, he said. We'll use my office. She followed him through the staff-only door and down a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. His office was at the end of a hallway, a medium-sized room with 2 windows facing the parking structure. There were framed diplomas on the wall and a photo of his family on the desk and a whiteboard covered in what looked like budget figures. He closed the door and sat down across from her. He did not offer her coffee this time. You've seen the announcement, he said. I have. Dennis moved faster than the board anticipated. I want you to know that there are people on the board who have serious concerns, Raymond. She kept her voice even. The gift agreement runs through 2031. The clinic provision is non-negotiable and it's not ambiguous. Reducing hours, adding a copay, converting to referral-based, any one of those would constitute a material breach. All 3 together is not a restructuring, it's a dismantling. He was quiet for a moment. You're right, he said. I know you're right. Then why am I finding this out from a press release? He looked at the desk. Dennis has the board's confidence right now. He's brought in strong revenue numbers, and they want to give him room to work. There are people who feel that the clinic has been, that the terms of the original agreement are limiting the hospital's ability to. I know what they feel, Margot said. I've been watching this happen for 6 months. I want to know what the board intends to do about it. Raymond looked up. I think they're hoping you'll agree to a renegotiation of a legally binding gift agreement. I know how that sounds. Do you? He was quiet again. Outside the window, a parking garage elevator opened, and a woman in a blue coat walked out, pulling a small suitcase. The board meets Friday, Raymond said finally. I can get you a seat at the table. You could have done that 8 weeks ago. Yes, he said. I could have. The honesty of it sat there between them. She appreciated that at least. Friday, she said. I'll be there. She called Gwen from the parking garage. How did it go? Gwen asked. Friday board meeting, they want to renegotiate. They can want whatever they'd like. The agreement doesn't allow for renegotiation without written consent from the foundation. I know that. They know that now too, I think. Margot unlocked her car. What's the status on the independent audit? Complete. I'll send you the summary tonight. Short version. The clinic has been operating at a net cost to the hospital of about $900,000 a year, but the grant disbursements from the foundation have covered that, and then some. Webb's team is presenting the clinic as a financial drain, but they're only counting the costs, not the revenue the foundation contributions offset. Of course they are. Margot got in the car. Who presented those numbers to the board? Webb, as far as I can tell. With a consulting firm he brought in, is there a conflict of interest there? I'm looking into it, Gwen said. I should know more by Thursday. Margot sat for a moment with the engine off. Through the concrete wall of the garage, she could see a sliver of sky, gray and even. The clinic serves 400 people a month, she said. It wasn't a question. 412 per the last count. Okay. She started the car. I'll see you Thursday. She did not go home. She drove instead to a neighborhood called Linwood, about 2 miles east of the hospital, and parked outside a building that housed a food pantry, a community center, and a small office used by a nonprofit called Bridgepoint Health. Bridgepoint was the organization that ran the free clinics outreach program, the team that made calls, sent reminders, helped patients navigate the system when the system made itself difficult to navigate. The person who ran Bridgepoint was a man named Isaac Cole. Margot had not seen Isaac in person since a foundation event 2 years earlier, but they emailed regularly, brief, functional exchanges about numbers and needs and logistics. He was in his mid-40s, she guessed, though she'd never asked. He'd spent 12 years as a social worker before starting Bridgepoint with a grant from the county and a borrowed desk in a church basement. The organization now employed 6 full-time staff and had a roster of about 40 volunteers. He was at his desk when she knocked on the open door, reading something on his computer with the focused expression of a person who has learned to concentrate in a noisy environment. The office was small and stacked with papers and had a corkboard on one wall covered in photographs of patients, staff, events, handwritten notes. He looked up. It took a half-second for recognition to arrive. Ms. Ellison. He stood, a reflex. I didn't know you were coming by. I was in the neighborhood, she said, which was true enough. Do you have a few minutes? Of course. He gestured to the chair across from his desk and closed the door. She sat down. So did he. He was not nervous exactly, but he was attentive in the way people are when they understand that a visit from the person holding the money is never entirely casual. I've been to the hospital this morning, she said. I spoke with Raymond Cho. Something in his expression shifted. The restructuring. Tell me what it looks like from where you're sitting. He was quiet for a moment. Not gathering himself, she had the sense he'd been thinking about this for weeks and just needed a second to decide where to start. We've had 14 patients in the last month come to us because they got to the clinic and were told about the new copay, he said. Most of them are working. Most of them are working 2 jobs. But they don't have insurance, and $25 might not sound like much. But for some of these families, that's the calculation between coming in and not coming in, and the referral system? That's the one that really worries me. He leaned forward slightly. Our patients, a lot of them don't have a primary care doctor to give a referral. That's why they're coming to a walk-in clinic. If you tell someone they need a referral before they can be seen, for a lot of them, that's the end of the road. They just don't come, and then they come to the ER 3 months later with something that could have been caught and wasn't. Margot nodded slowly. What about the lease conversation? She asked. The urgent care company. He looked at her steadily. You know about that. I was told. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, he said. I wasn't sure if it was my place. It's your place, she said, always. He nodded. From what I understand, they've already had preliminary conversations. The space the clinic uses, the ground floor suite, is apparently attractive for a private operator because of the foot traffic. It's been framed internally as a positive development because the urgent care company would serve some of the same population at market rate, which would mean serving none of the same population. Functionally, yes. Outside the office, she could hear a phone ringing, someone laughing, the sound of a door. Real sounds, ordinary sounds, the texture of a place that was actually doing what it said it was doing. Isaac, she said, if the clinic closes, worst case, can Bridgepoint absorb the patient load? He looked at her directly. No, he said, not without significant funding. And not without a space. Understood. She stood. I'll be at the board meeting Friday. I wanted you to know that directly. He stood too. He was taller than she remembered. Mrs. Ellison, he said, with respect, they're not going to like it. No, she agreed. They won't. She picked up her coat from the chair back. He held the door for her, and she walked back out through the community center, past a woman setting up folding chairs for what looked like a meeting, past a bulletin board covered in flyers in 4 languages, past a table where someone had left a coffee cup and a library book and a pair of reading glasses, the ordinary artifacts of a life in motion. She was in the kitchen of her house that evening, reheating something her daughter had dropped off over the weekend, when her phone rang. The name on the screen, Dennis Webb. She let it ring once more before she answered. Mr. Webb, she said. Ellison. His voice was smooth, practiced. I appreciate you making time to come in today. I understand you met with Raymond. I did. I wanted to reach out personally, he said, because I think there may have been some miscommunication around the timeline of these changes. Our intent has always been to keep the foundation informed. Mr. Webb, she said, I received a press release 2 weeks after our phone call and nothing before or since. I don't think there's been a miscommunication. A pause. I understand there are concerns about the gift agreement. The gift agreement is a legal contract. It's not a concern. It's a fact. Of course. Another pause, more calculated. I want you to know that I'm personally committed to finding a path forward that works for everyone. I'd love to sit down before Friday, maybe Thursday, if you're available, and see if we can find some common ground before the board meeting. She thought about Isaac Cole's face when he said they've already had preliminary conversations. She thought about the boy in the lobby with the one-eyed elephant. She thought about her mother in that emergency room in a city she didn't know. I'll see you Friday, Mr. Webb, she said. At the board meeting, she hung up. Thursday evening, Gwen sent the audit summary and something else, a set of documents her firm had obtained through a records request. 3 of them were emails between Dennis Webb and a partner at the consulting firm he'd used to prepare the financial analysis. The 4th was a memo from that same consulting firm to a private equity firm dated 6 months earlier, describing Hargrove Memorial as a strategic acquisition candidate with a significant underutilized real estate footprint. The consulting firm had been paid by the hospital. It had simultaneously been advising the private equity firm on acquisition targets. Margot read everything twice, then she called Gwen. Is this what I think it is? She said. It's not pretty, Gwen said. It may not rise to the level of criminal fraud, but it's a clear undisclosed conflict of interest. If the board voted on the restructuring without knowing that their COO's consulting firm had a financial interest in the hospital being broken up for parts, that's a governance failure. At minimum, does the board know? I don't think so. They will on Friday, Margot said. The board meeting was held in a conference room on the 7th floor, the kind of room with a long mahogany table and a view of the city that was designed to make people feel consequential. There were 11 board members. Most of them were already seated when Margot arrived, 4 minutes before the scheduled start. Dennis Webb was at the end of the table. He looked at her with the particular expression of a man who expected to control a room and has just received information suggesting he will not. She had seen that expression before. Raymond, beside her, had the look of a man who has been dreading a day for a long time and is relieved it has finally arrived. The board chair, a woman named Patricia who had run a regional bank for 20 years and had a handshake like a vice grip, called the meeting to order. When she reached the foundation agenda item, she turned to Margot. "Mrs. Ellison," Patricia said, "you requested time. It's yours." Margot set her folder on the table. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform. She had given talks in boardrooms before, and she knew that the most powerful thing you could do in a room like this was to speak slowly and plainly, to let the facts carry their own weight, to never give the person across the table a reason to focus on how you were saying something instead of what you were saying. She started with the gift agreement. She walked through the provisions, quoted the specific language, explained what each of the proposed changes would constitute in terms of breach. She cited the legal precedent. She was not there to threaten. She was there to be clear. Then she presented the audit. Then she set the emails and the memo on the table. The room was very quiet. Dennis Webb said, "Those documents were obtained through a lawful records request," Margot said. "Yes." Patricia picked up the memo. She read it, then set it down with a care that was more expressive than any display of anger would have been. She looked at Dennis Webb. "I think," Patricia said, "that we have some things to discuss as a board before we proceed." Dennis started to speak. "Internally," Patricia said. "We'll be in touch with you, Dennis." She stood in the lobby again on her way out. The chairs were the same. The silent television was the same. The hand sanitizer dispenser in the corner still blinked its warning. Isaac Cole was standing near the entrance doors. She hadn't expected him, but when he saw her face, he seemed to read it. "How did it go?" he asked. "They'll vote next week," she said. "But I think they'll do the right thing. And Webb? That's for the board and the lawyers." She picked up her coat from where she'd set it over her arm. "The clinic stays open. I'm going to make sure of that." He nodded. He was quiet for a moment, in the way people are quiet when they want to say something and are deciding whether to say it. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Go ahead. Why did you wait?" He said it without any edge in it, a real question. "You've had the leverage this whole time. You could have walked in here 8 weeks ago, and I know," she said. "I wanted to understand what was happening before I stopped it. Not just the documents. I wanted to see the room, the lobby. I wanted to sit here and see what the place feels like when nobody's looking." She paused, "And I wanted to understand what would be lost." He looked at her. "I know what would be lost," he said. "I know you do," she said. "That's why I came to you first." The board voted the following Wednesday. 12-0, Patricia told her by phone, with a formality that Margot suspected was slightly uncomfortable given how one-sided it had been. The restructuring was suspended pending a full governance review. Dennis Webb had submitted his resignation the evening before. Raymond called an hour after Patricia. He sounded tired and relieved in equal measure. "I should have called you sooner," he said. "Yes," she said. "You should have. I'm sorry, Margot." "I know," she meant it. "Raymond, the liaison committee hasn't been functioning. If we're going to get this right going forward, that needs to change." "I agree. I'd like to propose monthly meetings with someone from Bridgepoint at the table." "Good," she said. "Start with Isaac Cole." A few weeks later, she went back to the community center in Linwood for a Bridgepoint staff meeting that Isaac had invited her to, not as a donor, just as someone who wanted to understand the work better. She sat at a folding table in a room that smelled of old coffee and dry erase markers, and listened to 6 people talk about the 100 small problems that made up the work of keeping 400 families healthy. Medication costs, transportation, the patients who stopped coming in because a form had gotten too complicated, the ones who kept coming no matter what. Afterward, Isaac walked her to her car. "How are you holding up?" he asked. It was the first time he had asked her something personal. "Better," she said. "It was harder than I expected, being here and not saying anything. Just watching." "What made you decide to do it that way?" She thought about it honestly. "My mother used to say that the most important thing was to understand what a place is before you try to change it. Not what it's supposed to be, what it actually is." He was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like someone who knew what she was talking about," he said. "She did," Margot said. "She was also a patient in this hospital, a long time ago. Before I was involved." He looked at her. "She got good care," Margot said. "Eventually. After we fought for it." She unlocked her car. The November air was sharp and clean, the kind that made the sky look closer than it was. She would have liked knowing it was still here, she said, and that it was going to stay that way. She got in, pulled the door shut, and drove home through the early dark.